Hey guys, tonight we're diving beneath the surface of the ocean to meet one of the strangest, most alien creatures on Earth. A being that doesn't have a brain, doesn't have a heart, and technically might never die. We're talking about jellyfish, those translucent drifters that have been haunting the oceans for over 600 million years, long before dinosaurs, before trees, before almost anything you can imagine. Before we float into the deep, take a moment to like this video if you genuinely enjoy falling asleep to biology and the strange wonders of the natural world. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I'm always curious who's drifting off with me across the globe. Now, settle in. Maybe adjust your pillow. Dim the lights. Let the weight of the day dissolve. Tonight, we're exploring creatures that challenge everything we think we know about life, death, and what it means to exist. Jellyfish don't fight the current. They simply exist within it, pulsing gently through the dark, and for the next hour or so, we'll do the same. These creatures are older than bones, older than eyes, older than blood. They've survived every mass extinction event this planet has thrown at them. They drift through oceans without a single thought, yet somehow they hunt, they reproduce, they regenerate, and at least one species has figured out how to cheat death entirely. No brain to process it, no heart to sustain it. Just existence, pure and simple. So let the hum of your fan fade into the background, let your breathing slow, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going deep, but we're going gently. If you've ever seen a jellyfish drifting past you in the ocean, pale and ghostly, tentacles trailing like silk ribbons in the current, you might have wondered what exactly you were looking at. It looks alien, it moves like something from another planet, and in a way, it is. Because jellyfish aren't just strange, they're fundamentally different from almost every other animal you've ever encountered. Let's start with the name. Jellyfish aren't fish. They never have been. They don't have fins, scales, gills, or bones. In fact, they don't have bones at all. Calling them fish is like calling a mushroom a vegetable. Technically wrong, but the name stuck anyway. Scientists prefer the term jellies or sea jellies, but for tonight, we'll stick with what most people know them as, jellyfish. So, what are they, really? Jellyfish belong to a group of animals called cnidarians, a name that comes from the Greek word for nettle, like the stinging plant. This group also includes corals, sea anemones, and tiny freshwater creatures called hydras. What ties them all together is their body structure and their stinging cells, which we'll get to later. But the important thing to understand is that jellyfish are part of one of the oldest branches on the animal family tree. They've been around for at least 600 million years. To put that in perspective, the first dinosaurs didn't appear until about 230 million years ago. Trees didn't exist until roughly 400 million years ago. Jellyfish were already ancient by the time the first vertebrates crawled onto land. They were drifting through Precambrian seas when life on Earth was still figuring out what shapes to take, what structures worked, what didn't. Fossil evidence shows us jellyfish impressions in rock, faint outlines of bells and tentacles pressed into sediment and preserved for 500 million years. These fossils are rare because jellyfish are soft-bodied, fragile, and they decompose quickly. But when conditions are just right, their forms are captured in stone, proof that the oceans have always belonged to them. Now, let's talk about what a jellyfish actually looks like, because their anatomy is as simple as it is strange. Picture a translucent bell shaped like an umbrella or a mushroom cap. That's the main body. Hanging beneath it are tentacles, sometimes just a few, sometimes hundreds, depending on the species. These tentacles are lined with specialized stinging cells that capture prey and defend against predators. Some jellyfish also have oral arms, thick, frilly structures near the mouth that help guide food inward. But here's the wild part. A jellyfish is roughly 95% water. Some species are even closer to 98%. That means there's almost nothing to them. No muscle in the way we think of it. No organs in the traditional sense. Just a thin layer of cells surrounding a gelatinous middle layer called the mesoglia, which gives them their jelly-like texture. The mesoglia is mostly water held together by structural proteins, a bit like a biological jello mold. Their body plan is radially symmetrical, meaning if you sliced a jellyfish down the middle from any angle, both halves would look the same. This is different from us. Humans are bilaterally symmetrical. We have a left side and a right side. But jellyfish are built like wheels, with everything radiating out from a central point. This design works beautifully for drifting creatures that don't need to move in one specific direction. And they truly are drifters. While jellyfish can pulse their bells to move up and down in the water column, most of their horizontal movement is passive. They go where the current takes them. They don't swim toward a destination. They don't hunt actively. They simply exist in the flow, tentacles spread like nets, waiting for something to drift into them. There are thousands of species of jellyfish, and they come in an astonishing variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. Some are transparent, nearly invisible. Others glow with bioluminescence, lighting up the deep ocean like living lanterns. Some have bells the size of your thumbnail. Others, like the lion's mane jellyfish, have bells over 2 meters across with tentacles that stretch longer than a blue whale. Despite their diversity, all jellyfish share the same basic blueprint. They have 2 main tissue layers, the outer epidermis and the inner gastrodermis, with that jelly-like mesoglia sandwiched in between. They have a single opening that functions as both mouth and anus. Food goes in, waste comes out, same hole. It's efficient, if a little unsettling to think about. They also lack most of the things we associate with animal life. No brain, no heart, no lungs, no blood. No liver, kidneys, or stomach in the traditional sense. And yet, they survive. They thrive. They've outlasted nearly every other lineage on Earth. How? By being simple. By not needing the complex machinery that burdens most other animals. In a way, jellyfish are proof that life doesn't need to be complicated to be successful. They're minimalists, stripped down to the essentials. A body that pulses, tentacles that sting, a gut that digests, and that's it. No thoughts, no plans, no stress, just existence, humming along in the current for hundreds of millions of years. So the next time you see one drifting in an aquarium or washed up on a beach, don't think of it as simple or primitive. Think of it as perfected, refined by time into something that works so well it barely needs to change. Now that we know what a jellyfish is, the next question is even stranger. How does something without a brain sense the world, move through it, and survive? Imagine trying to navigate your entire life without a brain. No thoughts, no memories, no ability to plan, to learn, to recognize danger before it happens. You'd think it would be impossible. And yet, jellyfish have been doing exactly that for over 600 million years, drifting through oceans, hunting prey, avoiding predators, and reproducing, all without a single neuron firing in a centralized command center. Because jellyfish don't have brains. Not even a simple one. No brainstem, no cortex, no clusters of neurons forming decision-making hubs. Where most animals have evolved increasingly complex nervous systems, jellyfish took a different path. They kept it simple. And somehow, it works. What they have instead is called a nerve net, a decentralized web of neurons spread throughout their entire body. Think of it less like a control tower and more like a mesh of sensors and triggers scattered across their bell and tentacles. These neurons communicate with each other locally, passing signals from cell to cell without needing a brain to interpret or coordinate. This nerve net allows jellyfish to respond to their environment in real time. Touch a tentacle, and the signal spreads outward, causing nearby muscles to contract. The jellyfish doesn't think about pulling away. It just does. The response is automatic, reflexive, hardwired into the structure itself. There's no delay for processing, no decision-making step. Stimulus meets response instantly. It's a bit like how your own body reacts when you touch something hot. Your hand pulls back before your brain even registers the pain. That's a reflex arc, a shortcut in your nervous system. For jellyfish, almost everything is a reflex. Their entire existence runs on biological autopilot. But here's where it gets interesting. Even without a brain, jellyfish can still sense the world around them. They have specialized structures called rhopalia, small sensory organs located around the edge of their bell. The number varies by species, but many jellyfish have 8 of these tiny clusters, evenly spaced like little watchtowers along the rim. Each rhopalium contains a balance organ called a statocyst, which helps the jellyfish detect up from down. Inside the statocyst is a tiny mineral crystal resting on sensory hairs. When the jellyfish tilts, the crystal shifts, bending those hairs and sending a signal through the nerve net. The jellyfish doesn't know it's tilting. It doesn't think about correcting its position. But the nerve net triggers muscle contractions that pulse the bell, and the jellyfish rights itself, maintaining its orientation in the water. Some jellyfish also have light-sensitive structures within their rhopalia, primitive eyes called ocelli. These aren't eyes in the way you'd recognize them. They don't form clear images, but they can detect light and shadow, brightness and darkness. For a jellyfish, that's enough. They can tell if they're drifting toward the surface, where sunlight is stronger, or sinking into the darker depths. And then there are box jellyfish, which take this even further. Box jellyfish have some of the most complex eyes in the invertebrate world, 24 eyes in total, arranged in clusters on their 4 rhopalia. Some of these eyes have lenses, corneas, and retinas, structures sophisticated enough to form actual images. Scientists believe box jellyfish can see shapes, detect obstacles, and navigate through coral reefs and mangrove roots with surprising precision. But here's the paradox. Box jellyfish have advanced eyes, but no brain to process what they're seeing. The visual information feeds directly into the nerve net, and somehow, without centralized processing, the jellyfish responds appropriately. It avoids obstacles, it follows light patterns, it hunts with intent. How this works, how a brainless animal coordinates complex behavior using decentralized neurons, is still something scientists are trying to fully understand. Beyond light and balance, jellyfish also sense chemicals in the water. They can detect the presence of prey, predators, or potential mates through chemical receptors on their tentacles and bell. When a small fish brushes against a tentacle, the jellyfish doesn't need to think, food. The nerve net simply fires, the tentacles contract, the stinging cells deploy, and the prey is captured. This decentralized nervous system has another advantage: redundancy. If you damage part of a jellyfish, the rest keeps functioning. There's no single point of failure. Cut off a section of tentacles, and the nerve net in the remaining tissue continues to operate independently. The jellyfish doesn't go into shock. It doesn't lose coordination. It just keeps pulsing, keeps drifting, keeps existing. In fact, some jellyfish can survive being cut into pieces, with each piece regenerating into a new individual under the right conditions. That kind of resilience is only possible because there's no central hub to lose. The nerve net is everywhere, and everywhere is capable of sustaining life. For humans, the idea of living without a brain is terrifying. Our entire sense of self, our memories, our emotions, our ability to navigate the world, all of it depends on that 3-pound organ inside our skull. But jellyfish remind us that consciousness, thought, and centralized control aren't requirements for life. They're just one strategy among many. Jellyfish don't need to think because they don't need to plan. They don't need to remember because every moment is the same. Drift, pulse, sting, consume. There's no anxiety about the future, no regret about the past, just existence, moment to moment, sensation to response, stimulus to action. It's almost peaceful when you think about it. A life without worry, without thought, without the burden of consciousness. Just a body moving through water, guided by ancient reflexes and a nervous system that's been working perfectly for hundreds of millions of years. So yes, jellyfish have no brain, but they also have no need for one. They've found a way to survive, to thrive, without the weight of thought, and, in a way, that's the most alien thing about them. But if they don't have a brain, they also don't have something else we consider essential: a heart. And yet, somehow, they still get oxygen, still distribute nutrients, still power every cell in their translucent bodies. How? Let's find out. Your heart beats roughly 100,000 times a day, pumping blood through 60,000 miles of vessels, delivering oxygen and nutrients to every cell in your body. It's a marvel of biological engineering, a tireless organ that keeps you alive from your first breath to your last. But jellyfish don't have one. No heart, no blood vessels, no circulation in any way you'd recognize. And yet, every cell in their bodies still gets oxygen, still receives nutrients, still functions perfectly. So how does that work? How does a jellyfish survive without the one thing we consider absolutely essential for complex life? The answer lies in their simplicity. Remember, jellyfish are roughly 95% water. Their bodies are thin, translucent, and structured in layers. The outermost layer, the epidermis, is in direct contact with seawater. The innermost layer, the gastrodermis, lines their gut cavity. And sandwiched between them is the mesoglea, that thick, gelatinous middle layer that gives them their jelly-like consistency. Because their body walls are so thin, oxygen doesn't need to be transported. It simply diffuses directly from the surrounding water into their cells. Diffusion is passive, requiring no pumps, no vessels, no coordinated system. Oxygen molecules move from areas of high concentration in the ocean to areas of low concentration inside the jellyfish's tissues. It's the same process that happens when you drop food coloring into a glass of water and watch it spread. Every cell in a jellyfish is close enough to either the outer surface or the inner gut cavity that oxygen can reach it through simple diffusion. There's no need for blood to carry it, no need for hemoglobin to bind it. The ocean itself becomes their circulatory system, flowing around them, through them, oxygenating them with every gentle pulse of their bell. The same principle applies to waste removal. In humans, carbon dioxide and metabolic waste are carried away by blood and processed by organs like the lungs and kidneys. Jellyfish skip all of that. Waste products diffuse out of their cells into the surrounding water and drift away. It's elegant, effortless, no filtration system required. Now, let's talk about nutrients, because jellyfish do eat, and they do need to distribute the energy from their food throughout their bodies. This is where their gastrovascular cavity comes in. The name itself tells you what it does. Gastro for digestion, vascular for circulation. It's a single cavity that serves both purposes at once. When a jellyfish captures prey with its tentacles, it uses its oral arms to guide the food into its mouth, which opens into this central cavity. Digestive enzymes are secreted into the cavity, breaking down the prey into a nutrient-rich soup. Then, instead of being absorbed into a bloodstream, these nutrients diffuse directly into the cells lining the gastrodermis. But here's the clever part. The gastrovascular cavity isn't just a simple sac. In many jellyfish species, it branches into a network of radial canals that extend outward toward the edge of the bell, kind of like the spokes of a wheel. These canals help distribute nutrients more evenly across the jellyfish's body, reaching cells that might be too far from the central cavity to rely on diffusion alone. Some jellyfish even have circular canals that connect the radial canals at the rim of the bell, creating a complete distribution network. It's not a circulatory system in the traditional sense, no heart-pumping fluid through closed vessels, but it functions similarly. Nutrients flow through these canals, passively moved by the jellyfish's pulsing contractions and the gentle sloshing of water inside its body. And then there's the mesoglia, that jelly-like middle layer. It's not just structural scaffolding, it's also a medium for diffusion. Dissolved nutrients and oxygen can move through it slowly, reaching the sparse cells embedded within. The mesoglia is mostly water with some structural proteins and cells scattered throughout, so diffusion happens easily. What makes this all possible is the jellyfish's low metabolic rate. They don't need much energy. They're not sprinting, not maintaining body temperature, not powering a complex brain. They drift. They pulse occasionally to adjust their position in the water column. They extend their tentacles and wait. This passive lifestyle means they can survive on very little, and simple diffusion is enough to meet their needs. Compare that to a human. We're active, warm-blooded, thinking constantly. Our brains alone consume about 20% of our total energy, even when we're at rest. Our muscles need constant fuel. Our organs work around the clock. We need an efficient delivery system for oxygen and nutrients, and a robust waste removal system to keep up with the demands of our metabolism. That's why we have hearts, lungs, livers, kidneys, a whole infrastructure dedicated to keeping our cells supplied and clean. Jellyfish don't have those demands. They're cold-blooded, their body temperature matching the surrounding water. They don't regulate, they just exist at whatever temperature the ocean happens to be. Their energy needs are minimal. A small fish here, some plankton there, and they're sustained for days. There's something almost meditative about it. No racing heartbeat, no blood pressure, no cardiovascular stress. Just water flowing in and around them, oxygen drifting inward, waste drifting outward, nutrients spreading slowly through branching canals. It's life at its most fundamental, stripped of complexity, functioning through the basic laws of chemistry and physics. And it works. It's worked for 600 million years, longer than hearts have existed, longer than blood has flowed through veins. Jellyfish are proof that life doesn't need the machinery we take for granted. It just needs a way to get resources in and waste out. So no, jellyfish don't have hearts. But they also don't need them. They've mastered survival through simplicity, through being thin enough, slow enough, and efficient enough that the ocean itself becomes their bloodstream. But while their bodies might be simple, their weapons are anything but. Because every jellyfish, drifting peacefully through the water, is armed with one of the most sophisticated and deadly biological mechanisms in nature. Jellyfish look harmless, translucent, delicate, drifting through the water like living glass. But brush against one, and you'll learn very quickly that they're armed. Because every jellyfish, from the smallest moon jelly to the most venomous box jellyfish, carries thousands, sometimes millions, of microscopic biological weapons called nematocysts, and they deploy faster than almost anything else in nature. Nematocysts are specialized stinging cells, and they're one of the defining features of all cnidarians: jellyfish, corals, sea anemones, hydras. But jellyfish have perfected them. Each nematocyst is a tiny capsule, invisible to the naked eye, coiled inside with a hollow thread or tubule. At the tip of this thread is a barbed harpoon, and inside the capsule is venom. The entire structure sits dormant until some truffaz it. On the outside of the nematocyst is a hair-like trigger called a cnidocyl. When prey or a potential threat brushes against it, the nematocyst fires. And when we say fires, we mean it. This is one of the fastest biological processes on Earth, happening in less than a millionth of a second. The coiled thread explodes outward with enough force to puncture the exoskeleton of a shrimp or the skin of a fish. The mechanism is purely mechanical, like a pressurized spring release. Inside the capsule, the pressure is extraordinarily high, held in check by a trapdoor. When the cnidocyl is triggered, the door opens, and the thread shoots out with such speed and force that it can accelerate at over 5 million gravities. For comparison, a bullet leaving a gun experiences around 20,000 gravities. Nematocysts are faster, more powerful, and far more precise than anything humans have engineered at that scale. Once the harpoon penetrates, venom is injected through the hollow thread directly into the victim's tissue. The venom varies by species. Some jellyfish have mild toxins that cause nothing more than a slight itch or rash. Others, like the Portuguese man-o'-war, though technically not a true jellyfish, but a siphonophore, deliver venom that causes excruciating pain, welts, and in rare cases, allergic reactions severe enough to be dangerous. And then there's the box jellyfish, specifically species like Chironex fleckeri, found in the waters around northern Australia and Southeast Asia. This is widely considered the most venomous creature in the ocean, possibly the most venomous animal on Earth. Its venom attacks the heart, the nervous system, and the skin simultaneously. Stings from a box jellyfish can cause cardiac arrest within minutes. Survivors describe the pain as unbearable, like being branded with hot irons across every inch of contact. What makes box jellyfish stings so deadly is the sheer number of nematocysts that fire at once. A single tentacle can carry millions of these cells. Brush against multiple tentacles, and you've been injected with venom from hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, of individual stingers all at once. The venom load is massive, overwhelming. But not all jellyfish are dangerous to humans. The moon jelly, one of the most common species, has nematocysts too, but they're too weak to penetrate human skin. You can handle a moon jelly gently and feel nothing. Their stingers are designed for plankton and tiny larvae, not large animals. They're armed, but harmlessly so, at least to us. Jellyfish use their nematocysts for two main purposes: hunting and defense. When a small fish swims into a jellyfish's tentacles, the nematocysts fire on contact, injecting venom that paralyzes the prey almost instantly. The tentacles then contract, guided by the jellyfish's nerve net, pulling the stunned prey toward the oral arms and into the mouth. It's efficient, passive predation. The jellyfish doesn't chase, it just waits, armed and ready. For defense, the same mechanism applies. A sea turtle biting into a jellyfish will get a mouthful of stinging cells. Most predators learn quickly to avoid certain species, but some, like the leatherback sea turtle, have adapted. Their throats are lined with tough, backward-pointing spines that help them swallow jellyfish without being affected by the stings. Evolution finds a way, even against nature's most sophisticated weapons. There are different types of nematocysts, each specialized for different functions. Some are purely for penetration and venom delivery. Others are sticky, designed to entangle prey rather than puncture it. Some wrap around bristles or appendages, holding the victim in place while other nematocysts deliver the killing blow. It's a coordinated system, multiple types of cells working together, all without a brain directing them. And here's the eerie part. Once a nematocyst fires, it's spent. It can't reload. But jellyfish continuously produce new ones, replacing the old as they're used or shed. A jellyfish's tentacles are essentially disposable arsenals, constantly regenerating, always ready. Even after a jellyfish dies, its nematocysts can still fire. Tentacles washed up on the beach, severed and dried out, can still sting if you touch them. Lifeguards and beachgoers know this. A dead jellyfish is still dangerous because the cells themselves are independent. They don't need the jellyfish to be alive. They just need a trigger. This is why the pain from a jellyfish sting often feels so immediate and intense. You're not dealing with a single injection. You're dealing with thousands of microscopic harpoons, all firing at once, each one delivering a payload of venom directly into your tissue. It's a biological ambush, scaled down to the cellular level. Jellyfish don't sting out of malice. They don't have the capacity for intent. They sting because that's what their cells are programmed to do. Touch the trigger, fire the weapon. It's automatic, reflexive, a survival mechanism refined over hundreds of millions of years. And it works. Predators learn to avoid them. Prey never sees them coming. And humans, despite our size and intelligence, still enter the water cautiously in places where jellyfish are known to bloom. So the next time you see a jellyfish drifting past, remember, that delicate, beautiful creature is armed with millions of microscopic harpoons, each one faster than a bullet, each one loaded with venom, each one waiting for the slightest touch, peaceful on the surface, deadly beneath. But once they've captured their prey, what happens next? How does a creature with no teeth, no jaw, and barely a digestive system manage to consume and process food? Let's find out. Imagine drifting through the ocean, no eyes to hunt with, no nose to smell prey, no brain to plan an attack. And yet, you need to eat. You need energy to pulse your bell, to regenerate your cells, to produce the next generation. So how do you do it? How do you feed yourself when you're essentially a floating stomach with tentacles? For jellyfish, eating isn't an active pursuit. It's an ambush, a waiting game. They drift through the water, tentacles spread wide like invisible nets, and they simply wait for something to swim into them. When it does, the nematocysts fire, injecting venom that paralyzes the prey almost instantly. A small fish, a shrimp, a larval crab, whatever it is, it stops struggling within seconds. Once the prey is immobilized, the tentacles begin to contract. This happens automatically, guided by the nerve net. The jellyfish doesn't think, pull the food closer. The signal just spreads through the network of neurons, and the muscles respond. Slowly, the tentacles draw the prey upward toward the underside of the bell, where the oral arms wait. Oral arms are those thick, frilly structures that hang beneath the bell near the mouth. Not all jellyfish have them, but many do. They're covered in tiny, hair-like cilia and mucus-secreting cells. As the prey is passed from the tentacles to the oral arms, these cilia beat in coordinated waves, creating a current that pushes the food toward the mouth. The mucus helps trap smaller particles, plankton and larvae that might otherwise slip away. The mouth itself is just an opening at the center of the oral arms, leading directly into the gastrovascular cavity. And here's the part that might make you uncomfortable. This opening serves as both mouth and anus. Food goes in, waste comes out, same hole. There's no separate digestive tract, no stomach, intestines, or rectum. Just one cavity, one opening, and a very efficient system for processing whatever enters. Once the prey is inside the gastrovascular cavity, digestion begins. Specialized cells lining the cavity secrete enzymes that break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. The prey essentially dissolves into a nutrient-rich soup. This process can take hours or even days, depending on the size of the meal and the species of jellyfish. As nutrients are released, they're absorbed directly into the cells of the gastrodermis, the inner tissue layer. Remember those radial canals we talked about earlier? In many jellyfish, the nutrient soup flows through these branching channels, distributing food throughout the body. It's not active circulation, no heart pumping it through. It's just passive flow, helped along by the gentle pulsing of the bell and the movement of cilia. What's left over, the indigestible bits, shells, bones, tough tissues, gets expelled back through the mouth. The jellyfish contracts, and the waste is pushed out into the water. Then it's ready to feed again. So what do jellyfish eat? It depends on the species and their size. Small jellyfish feed primarily on plankton, microscopic animals, fish larvae, tiny crustaceans drifting in the water column. They're filter feeders in a way, though instead of actively filtering water, they just spread their tentacles and let the plankton come to them. Larger jellyfish can take bigger prey. Some species eat fish, squid, and even other jellyfish. There are species that are cannibalistic, consuming members of their own kind without hesitation. In the ocean, there's no moral code, no taboo against eating your relatives. If it drifts into your tentacles and you can digest it, it's food. One of the more fascinating hunters is the lion's mane jellyfish, one of the largest species in the world. Its tentacles can stretch over 30 meters long, creating a massive curtain of stinging threads trailing beneath its enormous bell. Fish swimming through this curtain get stung from multiple angles, paralyzed instantly, and pulled upward into the oral arms. It's a slow, silent, inevitable capture. Jellyfish don't need to eat constantly. Their metabolic rate is so low that a single meal can sustain them for days, sometimes weeks. When food is abundant, they feed. When it's scarce, they simply slow down, reduce their activity, and wait. Some species can even shrink when food is unavailable, reducing their body size to conserve energy, then grow again when conditions improve. This adaptability is part of why jellyfish are such successful survivors. They're not picky eaters. They don't require specific prey. They'll consume whatever drifts into their tentacles. Plankton, fish eggs, larvae, small crustaceans, anything that triggers their nematocysts becomes a meal. And they're surprisingly efficient, because digestion happens in that central cavity with branching canals, nutrients are distributed evenly, very little is wasted. Almost everything that can be broken down and absorbed is used. It's a minimalist digestive system, but it works perfectly for their lifestyle. There's something almost meditative about the way jellyfish feed. No chasing, no struggle, no urgency. Just a slow drift through the water, tentacles extended, waiting. When prey arrives, it's captured, consumed, and digested without any conscious effort. The jellyfish doesn't hunt. It simply exists in a space where food eventually comes to it. In a way, it's the ultimate passive lifestyle. No stress, no planning, no fear of starvation, just patience. And when you're a creature made of 95% water with almost no energy demands, patience is easy. Humans, of course, can't survive that way. We need regular meals, balanced nutrition, complex digestive systems to extract energy from food. But there's something calming about imagining life as a jellyfish, drifting, waiting, taking only what comes to you, no more, no less. But feeding is only one part of survival. Jellyfish also need to reproduce, to create the next generation, and the way they do that is stranger than almost anything we've discussed so far. Because jellyfish don't just have one life stage, they have two, completely different from each other, and the transformation between them is something out of science fiction. Most animals have a straightforward life cycle. They're born, they grow, they reproduce, they die. Humans follow this path. So do cats, birds, trees, insects. But jellyfish took one look at that plan and decided to do something completely different. Because jellyfish don't just grow up, they transform. They live two entirely separate lives in two completely different forms, and the shift between them is so dramatic it barely seems like the same organism. Let's start at the beginning. When jellyfish reproduce sexually, males release sperm into the water, and females capture it to fertilize their eggs. Some species brood these eggs in pouches on their oral arms, others release them directly into the ocean. Either way, the fertilized egg develops into a tiny, swimming larva called a planula, is less than #0. 7 hash is greater than. The planula is microscopic, shaped like a flattened oval, covered in hair-like cilia that beat rhythmically to propel it through the water. It drifts with the currents for hours or days, searching, though it has no brain to know what it's searching for. Eventually, it finds a hard surface, a rock, a shell, a dock piling, even the bottom of a boat. And when it does, it settles down, attaches itself, and transforms. This is where things get strange. The planula doesn't grow into a jellyfish. Instead, it becomes a polyp, a stationary, tube-like creature that looks nothing like the jellyfish it will eventually produce. Picture a tiny anemone, no bigger than a few millimeters, anchored to the substrate with a stalk and a ring of tentacles waving at the top. That's a jellyfish polyp. The polyp feeds by capturing plankton with its tentacles, just like its future jellyfish form, but it doesn't move. It's rooted in place, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. And during that time, it can reproduce asexually, budding off clones of itself. A single polyp can create an entire colony, dozens or hundreds of genetically identical polyps clustered together on the same rock. This polyp stage can last indefinitely under the right conditions. If the water is too cold, if food is scarce, the polyp simply waits. It's patient. It can survive harsh winters, long periods without food, even environmental stresses that would kill a free-swimming jellyfish. The polyp is the survival stage, the anchor, the insurance policy against a changing ocean. But when conditions are right, when the water warms, when food becomes abundant, something remarkable happens. The polyp begins a process called strobulation. It starts to segment itself horizontally, like a stack of plates. Each segment develops into a tiny disc with scalloped edges, and one by one, these discs pinch off and swim away as baby jellyfish called ephyrae. Ephyrae look like miniature jellyfish, but with a star-shaped body instead of a smooth bell. They're only a few millimeters across, translucent and delicate, pulsing weakly as they drift into the open water. Over the following weeks or months, they grow, their bells rounding out, their tentacles lengthening, until they become the adult medusa form we recognize as jellyfish. So a single polyp can produce dozens of ephyrae in one strobulation event. And since polyps can live for years and clone themselves repeatedly, one fertilized egg can ultimately give rise to thousands of jellyfish. It's an explosive reproductive strategy, one that allows jellyfish populations to boom under favorable conditions. This two-phase life cycle, polyp and medusa, is one of the reasons jellyfish have been so successful for so long. The polyp stage allows them to wait out bad times, anchored safely to the seafloor. The medusa stage allows them to disperse, to colonize new areas, to reproduce sexually and mix genes. It's the best of both worlds: stability and mobility, patience and opportunity. Not all jellyfish follow this exact pattern. Some species skip the polyp stage entirely, developing directly from larva to medusa. Others remain as polyps for most of their lives, only briefly producing medusae during specific seasons. But the dual life cycle is common enough to be considered a defining feature of many jellyfish species. And then there's the colonial jellyfish, creatures like the Portuguese man-o'-war, which blur the line between individual and colony. A man-o'-war isn't a single organism, it's a colony of specialized polyps, each one performing a different function. Some form the gas-filled float that keeps the colony at the surface. Others become the stinging tentacles. Still others handle digestion or reproduction. Together they function as one organism, but technically they're many. It's a form of biological cooperation so extreme that the individual polyps can't survive on their own. They're completely dependent on the colony. And yet they're also genetically identical clones, so in a sense it's less cooperation and more like a single organism with modular parts. This flexibility, this ability to shift between forms, to clone themselves, to cooperate or exist independently, is part of what makes jellyfish so adaptable. They're not locked into one strategy. They can respond to their environment, switching between sexual and asexual reproduction, between stationary and free-swimming life, between individual and colonial existence. For humans, the idea of living two completely different lives is the stuff of fantasy. We grow, we age, we change gradually, but we're always fundamentally the same organism. Jellyfish, though, are proof that life doesn't have to follow a single trajectory. You can be one thing, then transform into something entirely different, and both versions are equally valid, equally real. It's almost like living twice, once as a rooted, patient polyp, waiting and watching, and once as a drifting, pulsing Medusa, flowing with the current. 2 lives, 2 forms, 1 organism. And for at least one species, those 2 lives might not even be the limit, because there's a jellyfish out there that has figured out how to cheat death entirely, to reverse its life cycle, and start over again, and again, and again. Let's talk about immortality. Death is supposed to be final. You're born, you live, you age, and eventually your cells stop dividing, your organs fail, and you die. That's the deal for almost every living thing on Earth. But there's a jellyfish, a tiny, translucent species no bigger than your pinky nail, that has found a loophole. It's called Turritopsis dohrnii, and it might be the only animal on the planet that can truly cheat death. This jellyfish doesn't just live a long time. It doesn't just age slowly. Under the right conditions, it can reverse its aging process entirely, rewinding its life cycle back to the beginning and starting over, again and again, potentially forever. Here's how it works. When an adult Turritopsis medusa is injured, starving, or stressed, it doesn't die. Instead, it sinks to the ocean floor, retracts its tentacles, and begins to transform. Its bell collapses inward, its cells start to change, and over the course of a few days, the jellyfish reverts back into a polyp, the stationary, immature form we talked about earlier. Once it's a polyp again, it's essentially hit the reset button. It's no longer an adult. It's back at the beginning of its life cycle, attached to a surface, feeding and waiting. And when conditions improve, it can go through strobilation again, budding off new ephorae that grow into adult medusae. One of those medusae might even be the same individual that reverted, now grown back into adulthood. This process is called transdifferentiation, and it's extraordinarily rare in the animal kingdom. Transdifferentiation means that specialized cells that have already committed to being one type of tissue, can transform into completely different types of cells. In Turritopsis, a muscle cell can become a nerve cell. A digestive cell can become part of the outer skin. The jellyfish's body essentially reprograms itself at the cellular level. For most animals, including humans, cells are locked into their roles. Once a skin cell, always a skin cell. Once a neuron, always a neuron. There are rare exceptions, like stem cells, but in general, differentiation is a one-way street. Turritopsis breaks that rule. Its cells can go backward, dedifferentiating into a less specialized state, then redifferentiating into something new. Scientists are fascinated by this because it challenges everything we thought we knew about aging and cellular identity. Aging, at its core, is the gradual accumulation of damage to cells and DNA. Eventually, that damage becomes too much, and the organism dies. But if you can reset your cells, reverse the damage, and start fresh, then aging loses its inevitability. Now, before we get too carried away, let's be clear about what this means. Turritopsis dohrnii is biologically immortal, but it's not practically immortal. In the wild, most of these jellyfish don't live forever. They get eaten by predators, they succumb to disease, they get swept into unfavorable currents, and die from environmental stress. Biological immortality just means there's no built-in expiration date, no programmed aging process that guarantees death. It doesn't mean invincibility. Still, the potential is staggering. In theory, a single Turritopsis could cycle through its life cycle indefinitely as long as nothing kills it. It could live for decades, centuries, possibly longer. We don't know because we haven't been able to track individuals long enough to find out. And it gets stranger. Turritopsis isn't the only species that shows this ability, though it's the most famous. A few other jellyfish and some hydra species can also revert to earlier life stages under stress. It's not common, but it's not unique either. Which raises the question, why did this ability evolve? What evolutionary advantage does it provide? The answer probably lies in survival flexibility. Jellyfish live in environments that can change rapidly. Water temperatures shift, food sources disappear, predators move in. Being able to revert to a polyp stage, which is more durable and can survive harsh conditions, gives the jellyfish a second chance. It's a form of biological insurance, a way to wait out bad times and re-emerge when things improve. For humans, the implications are tantalizing. If we could understand how Turritopsis reprograms its cells, could we apply that knowledge to regenerative medicine? Could we reverse tissue damage, regrow organs, or even slow aging? Researchers are studying this jellyfish intensely, trying to unlock the genetic and molecular mechanisms that make transdifferentiation possible. But we're a long way from jellyfish-inspired immortality treatments. Human cells are far more complex, our bodies far more intricate. What works for a creature that's 95% water and has no brain might not translate to a species with trillions of specialized cells and elaborate organ systems. Still, Turritopsis forces us to rethink what's possible. Aging isn't necessarily inevitable. Death isn't always the end. There are loopholes in biology, edge cases where the rules bend, and sometimes, in the depths of the ocean, a tiny jellyfish finds one of those loopholes and slips through. Imagine living your life knowing that if things got too difficult, if you were injured or starving or just exhausted, you could reset. You could go back to the beginning, become young again, and start over with everything you'd learned. It sounds like fantasy, but for Turritopsis dohrnii, it's just another survival strategy. Of course, immortality comes with its own questions. Would you remember your previous lives? Would you be the same individual, or would each cycle create someone new? For a jellyfish with no brain and no memory, the question is irrelevant. But for us, thinking creatures, it's haunting. Still, there's something almost comforting about the existence of Turritopsis. In a world where everything dies, where entropy always wins, here's a creature that refuses to follow the script. It doesn't fight death with strength or speed, it just quietly transforms, sinks to the bottom, and begins again. And maybe that's the real lesson. Survival isn't always about power or complexity. Sometimes it's about flexibility, about knowing when to let go of one form and become something else entirely. But immortality isn't the only strange trick jellyfish have mastered. Some of them have learned to glow in the dark, lighting up the ocean depths with living light. And that bioluminescence, as beautiful as it is, has changed human science in ways no one could have predicted. The deep ocean is one of the darkest places on Earth. Sunlight penetrates only the upper few hundred meters of water. Below that, it's eternal night, a blackness so complete that your eyes would see nothing, no matter how long you waited for them to adjust. And yet, the deep sea isn't entirely dark. Because down there, in the abyss, jellyfish glow. Bioluminescence is the production of light by a living organism, and it's surprisingly common in the ocean. Roughly 90% of deep-sea creatures have some form of bioluminescence. Jellyfish are among the most spectacular. Some species pulse with blue-green light, others trail glowing tentacles through the water like electric wires. A few can produce flashes so bright they temporarily blind predators. The light comes from a chemical reaction, not from heat or electricity. Inside specialized cells called photocytes, a molecule called luciferin reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. The reaction releases energy in the form of light. It's cold light, no heat produced, which is why it's sometimes called living light or cold fire. Different species use different versions of luciferin and luciferase, evolved independently over millions of years. But the basic principle is the same: chemical energy converting directly into light with almost no waste. It's one of the most efficient forms of illumination in nature, far more efficient than any light bulb humans have created.
So why do jellyfish glow? There are several reasons, and they vary by species. Some use bioluminescence as a defense mechanism.
When threatened, they produce a bright flash or a glowing cloud that startles or confuses predators, giving the jellyfish a chance to escape. Others use light to blend in with the faint glow of sunlight filtering down from above, a form of camouflage called counter-illumination. Some jellyfish use bioluminescence to attract prey. Their glowing tentacles or bell edges lure small fish or plankton closer, mistaking the light for food or safety. Once they're within reach, the nematocysts fire and the prey is captured. It's a trap, baited with light, set in the dark. And then there's communication. While jellyfish don't have brains or complex social structures, some species may use light patterns to signal their presence to others, particularly during reproduction. Flashes and pulses could serve as a way to find mates in the vast emptiness of the open ocean. One of the most famous bioluminescent jellyfish is Aquaria victoria, a species found along the west coast of North America. It's a relatively simple, transparent jellyfish with a gentle green glow along the edges of its bell. For decades, it was just another jellyfish, unremarkable except for its pretty light. But in the 1960s, a scientist named Osamu Shimomura began studying it.
Shimomura wasn't interested in the jellyfish itself. He wanted to understand how bioluminescence worked.
So he and his team collected thousands of Aquaria victoria, extracting the glowing substance from their bodies. What they discovered changed biology forever. Inside the jellyfish, they found a protein that fluoresced bright green when exposed to certain wavelengths of light. They called it green fluorescent protein, or GFP. At first, it seemed like a curiosity, an interesting quirk of jellyfish biochemistry. But then scientists realized they could use GFP as a biological marker, a way to track cells and molecules inside living organisms. By attaching GFP to other proteins, researchers could watch those proteins move through cells in real time. They could see when genes were activated, how diseases spread, how neurons connected in the brain. It was like turning on a light inside the cell, making the invisible visible. GFP revolutionized cellular biology, genetics, and medicine. It became one of the most widely used tools in research, helping scientists understand everything from cancer to Alzheimer's to how embryos develop. And in 2008, the scientists who discovered and developed GFP, including Shimomura, were awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. All of that, the decades of research, the medical breakthroughs, the Nobel Prize, came from studying a glowing jellyfish, a creature with no brain, drifting through the Pacific, producing light for reasons it will never understand. And yet, that light changed human science, is less than #0. 7 hash is greater than. Beyond GFP, bioluminescent jellyfish have inspired technology in other ways. Engineers study how jellyfish produce light so efficiently, hoping to design better lighting systems, biosensors, and even glow-in-the-dark materials for medical and industrial use. The jellyfish's ability to create light without heat, without electricity, is something we're still trying to replicate. In the deep ocean, bioluminescent jellyfish create one of the most beautiful sights in nature. Imagine descending in a submersible surrounded by total darkness and then suddenly lights. Dozens, hundreds of jellyfish pulsing with blue and green, drifting past like ghosts. Their bells glow softly, their tentacles trail luminous threads, and for a moment, the abyss feels less empty. Some species, like the comb jelly, though not a true jellyfish, produce rainbow-like waves of light along their bodies as they move. The light isn't bioluminescence in this case, but refraction, the bending of light through their cilia. Still, the effect is mesmerizing, a living prism drifting through the dark. There's something almost magical about bioluminescence. It's life asserting itself in the darkest places, saying, "I'm here. I exist." No sun reaches these depths, but jellyfish don't need the sunday, they carry their own light. And they do it without thought, without intention. The chemical reaction happens automatically, triggered by stress, by movement, by the presence of prey. The jellyfish doesn't decide to glow. It just does. Light as reflex, beauty as biology. For humans who have always feared the dark, who have always needed fire and torches and electric bulbs to feel safe, there's something comforting about creatures that carry light within them. They remind us that even in the deepest, coldest, most isolated places, life finds a way to shine. But bioluminescence is just one of many extremes in the jellyfish world. Because these creatures come in sizes that defy imagination, from giants with tentacles longer than whales to miniatures smaller than your fingernail. Let's explore the spectrum. Size is relative. A mouse looks up at a human and sees a giant. A human looks up at a blue whale and feels the same way. But in the ocean, jellyfish have pushed the concept of size to both extremes. Some are so massive they dwarf most animals on Earth. Others are so small you could hold dozens on your fingertip and barely see them. Let's start with the giants. The lion's mane jellyfish, Cyania capillata, holds the title for one of the largest jellyfish species in the world. Its bell can grow over 2 meters in diameter, wider than most humans are tall. But the bell isn't even the impressive part. It's the tentacles. They trail beneath the jellyfish in thick, tangled clusters, stretching outward and downward like a living curtain. The longest recorded lion's mane jellyfish had tentacles that measured over 36 meters long. That's longer than a blue whale, the largest animal ever known to exist. Imagine swimming through the ocean and encountering something like that. You wouldn't see the bell at first. Just an endless field of stinging threads hanging in the water, pulsing gently, waiting. Lion's mane jellyfish live in cold waters, particularly in the Arctic, the northern Atlantic, and the northern Pacific. The colder the water, the larger they grow. Warmer populations tend to be smaller, sometimes only a meter across. But in the frigid seas near the poles, they reach their full, terrifying size. Their tentacles aren't just long, they're densely packed with nematocysts, millions of stinging cells ready to fire on contact. Fish, smaller jellyfish, plankton, anything that drifts into that curtain gets stung, paralyzed, and consumed. It's a passive trap, but devastatingly effective. The lion's mane doesn't chase prey. It just spreads itself across as much water as possible and waits. Despite their size, lion's mane jellyfish are still mostly water, still fragile. They're not aggressive. They don't attack humans intentionally. But if you swim into their tentacles, you'll know it. The sting isn't usually dangerous, but it's painful, leaving red welts that can last for days. Divers and swimmers in cold waters learn quickly to watch for the reddish-brown bells drifting near the surface. On the opposite end of the spectrum is the Irukandji jellyfish, a creature so small it's almost invisible. Irukandji species, particularly Carukia barnesi, have bells that are typically less than 1 centimeter across, about the size of a pinky fingernail. Their tentacles are thin, delicate, barely visible in the water. You could swim right past one and never notice. But that tiny size is deceptive, because the Irukandji is one of the most venomous creatures in the ocean. Its sting doesn't hurt much at first. There's a mild burning sensation, easy to dismiss, but 15 to 30 minutes later, symptoms begin. Severe pain in the back, chest, and abdomen. Nausea, vomiting, sweating, anxiety, a sensation of impending doom so intense that victims describe it as feeling like they're about to die. This cluster of symptoms is called Irukandji syndrome, and it can be life-threatening. The venom affects the cardiovascular system, causing spikes in blood pressure that can lead to brain hemorrhages or heart failure. Some stings have been fatal. Others leave victims hospitalized for days, struggling with pain that's difficult to manage even with strong medications. What makes Irukandji jellyfish particularly dangerous is their size. They're so small they can pass through stinger nets designed to protect swimmers. They drift unnoticed in shallow waters, sometimes in large numbers, and because they're nearly transparent, people don't see them until it's too late. Between these extremes, there's an incredible diversity of sizes. The moon jelly, one of the most common species, typically has a bell around 20 to 40 centimeters across, roughly the size of a dinner plate. The purple striped jelly can reach up to 70 centimeters. The black sea nettle, found off the coast of California, grows bells over a meter wide with tentacles stretching 6 meters or more. Size in jellyfish is influenced by several factors. Water temperature plays a role. Colder waters tend to produce larger individuals, possibly because cold water holds more oxygen and supports slower metabolisms, allowing for longer growth periods. Food availability matters too. Jellyfish in nutrient-rich areas with abundant plankton grow larger than those in sparse environments. Lifespan also affects size. Some jellyfish live only a few months, never reaching their full potential size before reproducing and dying. Others live for years, growing steadily the entire time. The lion's mane jellyfish can live up to a year in the wild, long enough to reach its massive proportions. But size doesn't always correlate with danger or success. The tiny Irukandji is far more dangerous to humans than the massive lion's mane. And in terms of survival, both strategies work. Being large means fewer predators can eat you. Being small means you're harder to find, easier to hide, and you require less food to survive. There's something almost surreal about the size range in jellyfish. That the same basic body plan, bell, tentacles, nerve net, gastrovascular cavity, can scale from fingernail size to longer than a whale. It's a testament to how adaptable the jellyfish blueprint is, how well it works at almost any size, and it's a reminder that the ocean holds extremes we rarely encounter on land. On land, the smallest mammals are shrews and the largest are elephants, a size difference of maybe a few thousand times. In the ocean, jellyfish span a similar range, but with far less structural complexity. They don't need bones to support massive size. They don't need intricate organ systems, just more water, more mesoglea, longer tentacles. So whether you're looking at a giant drifting through Arctic waters with tentacles trailing behind like a living net, or a nearly invisible speck pulsing through tropical shallows with venom potent enough to kill, you're seeing the same fundamental creature, just scaled to fit its environment, its prey, its survival strategy. But individual jellyfish, whether giants or miniatures, are just part of the story, because sometimes jellyfish don't drift alone. Sometimes they gather in numbers so vast they turn the ocean into a living soup, and when they do, the consequences can be catastrophic. Imagine standing on a beach and looking out at the water. The ocean is usually blue or green, waves rolling in, foam breaking on the sand. But today, something's different. The water near the shore is murky, thick, almost soupy. And as you look closer, you realize the entire bay is filled with jellyfish. Thousands of them, maybe millions. Their bells pulsing just beneath the surface, their tentacles tangling together in a writhing, translucent mass. This is a jellyfish bloom, and they're becoming more common around the world. A bloom happens when jellyfish populations explode in a short period of time, gathering in such dense concentrations that they dominate entire sections of the ocean. Sometimes these blooms are seasonal and natural. Other times, they're triggered by human activity and environmental changes. Let's start with the natural causes. Jellyfish populations naturally fluctuate with the seasons. In spring and summer, when water temperatures rise and plankton populations boom, jellyfish polyps on the seafloor begin strobilation, releasing thousands of effirae into the water. These baby jellyfish feed on the abundant plankton, grow quickly, and reproduce. Within weeks, their numbers can skyrocket. Is less than #0. 7# is greater than. Ocean currents also play a role. Jellyfish are passive drifters, carried by the currents wherever they go. Sometimes currents converge, pushing jellyfish from wide areas into smaller spaces. What was a dispersed population becomes a concentrated swarm. Bays, harbors, and coastal inlets are particularly prone to this, acting like funnels that trap jellyfish as they drift with the tides. But in recent decades, jellyfish blooms have been increasing in frequency, size, and duration, and many scientists believe human activity is a major factor. Overfishing is one of the biggest contributors. When humans remove large fish populations, predators and competitors of jellyfish, we create a vacuum. Jellyfish move in to fill it. Many fish species eat jellyfish or compete with them for plankton. Sea turtles, tuna, sunfish, certain types of salmon, they all consume jellyfish as part of their diet. When these populations decline, jellyfish have fewer predators. They also have less competition for food. The result is an environment where jellyfish thrive while other species struggle. Nutrient pollution is another major cause. When fertilizers from farms, sewage from cities, and runoff from development flow into the ocean, they carry excess nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus. These nutrients fuel massive plankton blooms, which in turn provide abundant food for jellyfish. More food means faster growth, higher survival rates, and more reproduction. Climate change is also playing a role. Warmer ocean temperatures create longer growing seasons for jellyfish, allowing them to reproduce more frequently and reach maturity faster. Some species are expanding their range into waters that were previously too cold for them. And as ocean currents shift due to changing temperatures, jellyfish are being carried into new areas where they have no natural predators. The impacts of jellyfish blooms can be severe. Fisheries are often devastated. Massive swarms of jellyfish can clog fishing nets, tearing them apart or making the catch unsellable. In some cases, jellyfish blooms have wiped out entire fish farms, killing thousands of farmed salmon when stinging tentacles overwhelm the pens. Power plants and desalination facilities are also vulnerable. These installations draw in seawater for cooling or processing, and when jellyfish blooms occur, the intake pipes can become completely blocked. In 2006, a nuclear power plant in the Philippines was forced to shut down when millions of jellyfish clogged its cooling system. Similar incidents have occurred in Japan, Israel, Scotland, and the United States. Tourism takes a hit as well. Beaches filled with jellyfish become unusable. Swimmers stay out of the water. Snorkeling and diving trips are cancelled. Coastal economies that depend on tourism can lose millions of dollars during a major bloom. And then there's the ecological impact. Jellyfish are voracious predators of plankton, fish eggs, and larvae. A large bloom can consume vast quantities of these organisms, reducing the food available for other marine life, and potentially stunting the recovery of fish populations that are already in decline. Some blooms are so large they're visible from space. Satellite images have captured jellyfish swarms covering hundreds of square kilometers, turning entire sections of the ocean into a hazy, discolored mass. In 2007, a bloom of Pelagia noctiluca, a stinging species, invaded the coasts of Spain and France, forcing beaches to close and causing millions of euros in economic losses. In the Sea of Japan, giant Nomura's jellyfish, which can weigh up to 200 kilograms each, have formed blooms so dense that fishing boats couldn't operate. Nets filled with jellyfish instead of fish, and the weight of the catch sometimes capsized smaller vessels. These blooms occurred almost every year for over a decade, devastating local fishing communities. What makes jellyfish blooms particularly concerning is that they may represent a feedback loop. Overfishing and pollution create conditions that favor jellyfish. As jellyfish populations grow, they consume more fish eggs and larvae, making it harder for fish populations to recover. This keeps predation pressure low and competition minimal, allowing jellyfish to continue dominating the ecosystem. Some scientists worry that certain ocean areas are shifting into a jellyfish-dominated state, where fish populations remain suppressed and jellyfish become the primary large organisms in the water column. If this happens, it could be difficult or impossible to reverse without major changes in how we manage ocean resources. Not all blooms are harmful, though. Some are natural, temporary, and part of healthy ocean cycles. Jellyfish have been blooming for millions of years, long before humans were around. The concern is about the blooms that are unnatural in scale, frequency, or location, the ones driven by human activity rather than seasonal rhythms. There's also a strange beauty to jellyfish blooms, even as they cause problems. Aerial footage shows them moving like living clouds beneath the surface, thousands of translucent bodies pulsing in unison. At night, if the species is bioluminescent, the water glows with their collective light, an eerie blue-green radiance spreading across the waves. But beauty doesn't change the reality. Jellyfish blooms are increasing, and they're a symptom of larger imbalances in ocean ecosystem. They're a sign that something has shifted, that the ancient rhythms of the sea are being disrupted by forces jellyfish are uniquely equipped to exploit. And perhaps that's the most unsettling part. Jellyfish aren't invaders. They're not new. They've been here longer than almost anything else. They're just responding to the changes we've made, thriving in the spaces we've created, filling the gaps we've left behind. The ocean is changing, and jellyfish are showing us exactly how. But blooms aside, jellyfish have another claim to resilience. They've survived longer than nearly any other complex organism on Earth, persisting through catastrophes that wiped out countless other species. Let's talk about survival. Life on Earth has endured 5 major mass extinction events. Catastrophes so severe they wiped out the majority of species alive at the time. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. The volcanic eruptions that nearly sterilized the planet. The oxygen crisis that poisoned early oceans. Each time the world was reshaped, ecosystems collapsed, and most living things vanished forever. But jellyfish survived them all, every single one. They were here before the extinctions, and they're still here now, relatively unchanged, still drifting through the same oceans their ancestors inhabited 600 million years ago. That kind of resilience is almost unimaginable. To understand how remarkable this is, let's put it in perspective. Dinosaurs ruled the Earth for about 165 million years before going extinct. Humans, in our modern form, have only been around for roughly 300,000 years. Jellyfish have been thriving for over 600 million years. They've outlasted nearly everything. The oldest confirmed jellyfish fossils date back to the Cambrian period, around 510 million years ago, though some evidence suggests they may have existed even earlier, possibly as far back as 700 million years. These ancient jellyfish looked remarkably similar to modern ones. Translucent bells, trailing tentacles, radial symmetry. The design hasn't changed much because it didn't need to. Fossilized jellyfish are rare because they're soft-bodied and decompose quickly. Most dead jellyfish simply dissolve back into the ocean, leaving no trace. But occasionally, conditions are perfect. Fine sediment covers a jellyfish before it decays, and the impression is preserved in stone. These fossils show us that jellyfish have been essentially the same for 500 million years. So, what makes them so resilient? Why have they survived when so many other species, more complex, more intelligent, more adaptable in theory, have disappeared? The answer lies in their simplicity. Jellyfish don't depend on complex ecosystems or specific food sources. They're generalist predators. They eat whatever drifts into their tentacles: plankton, fish larvae, tiny crustaceans, other jellyfish. If one food source disappears, they switch to another. There's no specialization, no dependency on a single prey species. Flexibility is built into their survival strategy. They also have low metabolic demands. Because they're mostly water and have no brain, heart, or complex organs, they require very little energy to survive. They can go weeks without food. Some species can even shrink when nutrients are scarce, reducing their body size to conserve energy, then grow back when conditions improve. This metabolic flexibility means they can endure environments where other animals would starve. Their reproductive strategy also contributes to their resilience. Remember the dual life cycle, the polyp stage and the medusa stage. Polyps are incredibly hardy. They can survive temperature extremes, low oxygen levels, and long periods without food. They cling to rocks, shells, or ship hulls, waiting out bad conditions, sometimes for years. And when the environment improves, they produce medusae again. The species persists even when the free-swimming adults die off. Jellyfish can also reproduce both sexually and asexually. If populations are low and mates are scarce, polyps can clone themselves, creating genetically identical colonies. When populations are healthy, medusae reproduce sexually, mixing genes and maintaining genetic diversity. This dual strategy means jellyfish can recover quickly from population crashes. Their ability to tolerate extreme conditions is another factor. Some jellyfish species live in nearly freezing Arctic waters. Others thrive in tropical lagoons where temperatures reach 30 degrees Celsius or more. Some inhabit the deep sea, where pressure is crushing and sunlight never reaches. Others live in coastal shallows, in estuaries where salinity fluctuates wildly. Jellyfish, as a group, occupy almost every marine environment on Earth. They're also remarkably tolerant of low oxygen levels. Many marine animals, especially fish, need high concentrations of dissolved oxygen to survive. But jellyfish have such low metabolic rates and rely on diffusion rather than active circulation, so they can survive in oxygen-depleted waters where other creatures suffocate. This gives them an advantage in polluted or warming oceans, where oxygen levels are declining. During mass extinctions, the oceans change drastically. Temperature swings, ocean acidification, loss of oxygen, disruption of food webs. These changes killed species that were specialized, that depended on stable conditions or specific resources. But jellyfish, with their generalist diet, low energy needs and tolerance for extremes, kept going. They didn't need stability. They just needed water and something to eat. There's also the fact that jellyfish occupy a unique ecological niche. They're not top predators, so they don't collapse when prey becomes scarce. But they're also not at the bottom of the food chain, so they're not as vulnerable to being wiped out by predators. They exist in a kind of middle space, feeding on plankton and small animals while being eaten by larger ones, but never so specialized that they can't adapt. And then there's their simplicity itself. Complex organisms with intricate organ systems, specialized diets, and elaborate behaviors are more vulnerable to environmental shifts. If one part of the system fails, the whole organism can collapse. But jellyfish have so few parts, so little complexity, that there's less to go wrong. They're resilient because they're simple. This simplicity also means they evolve slowly. Most of their basic body plan has remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. They didn't need to evolve elaborate defenses, complex brains, or sophisticated sensory systems. What they had worked, and it still works. In evolutionary terms, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Today, as the oceans face new threats from climate change, pollution, and overfishing, jellyfish are once again proving their resilience. While many fish populations decline and coral reefs bleach and die, jellyfish populations are often increasing. They're not thriving because they're superior. They're thriving because they're adaptable, because they can survive in conditions that other animals can't. In a way, jellyfish are the ultimate survivors, not because they fight, not because they're strong or fast or intelligent, but because they're simple, flexible, and endlessly patient. They've watched the world change around them for over 600 million years, and they're still here, still drifting, still pulsing through the currents. And while we tend to think of survival as an active struggle, jellyfish remind us that sometimes the best strategy is just to be simple enough, flexible enough, and patient enough to outlast everything else. But survival isn't just about enduring. It's also about fitting into the larger ecosystem, about playing a role that keeps the ocean balanced. And jellyfish, despite their simplicity, are far more important to that balance than most people realize. In the ocean, nothing exists in isolation. Every creature, from the smallest plankton to the largest whale, plays a role in the vast, interconnected web of marine life. Jellyfish, for all their strangeness and simplicity, are no exception. They're both predators and prey, consumers and consumed, and their presence shapes the ecosystem in ways that ripple far beyond their translucent bodies. Let's start with what jellyfish eat. As we've discussed, they're carnivores, feeding primarily on zooplankton, tiny drifting animals that include copepods, krill larvae, fish eggs, and larval fish. In areas where jellyfish are abundant, they can consume staggering quantities of these organisms. A single large jellyfish might eat hundreds or thousands of plankton in a day. A bloom containing millions of jellyfish can strip entire sections of ocean nearly clean. This predation pressure affects the entire food web. Plankton are the foundation of marine ecosystems, the primary food source for countless species. When jellyfish consume large amounts of plankton, less is available for other planktivores like small fish, which in turn affects the larger fish that eat them. It's a cascade effect, where changes at one level ripple upward through the entire system. Jellyfish also consume fish eggs and larvae, which can have long-term impacts on fish populations. If a jellyfish bloom coincides with the spawning season of commercially important fish like anchovies or sardines, the bloom can significantly reduce recruitment, the number of young fish that survive to adulthood. This creates a feedback loop. Fewer fish means fewer predators eating jellyfish, which allows jellyfish populations to grow even larger. But jellyfish aren't just predators, they're also prey. Despite their stinging cells, many animals have evolved ways to eat them.
Sea turtles are among the most famous jellyfish predators.
Leatherback turtles, in particular, feed almost exclusively on jellyfish, consuming their own body weight in jellyfish every day. Their throats are lined with backward-pointing spines that help them swallow slippery prey and protect them from stings. Ocean sunfish, or mola mola, are another major jellyfish predator. These massive, strange-looking fish cruise through the open ocean, feeding on jellyfish and other gelatinous organisms. A single sunfish can eat dozens of jellyfish in a day, using their small, beak-like mouths to tear apart the bells and tentacles. Certain species of fish, including tuna, swordfish, and some types of salmon, also consume jellyfish, particularly when other prey is scarce. Seabirds like fulmars and albatrosses will pick at jellyfish floating on the surface. Even some sea slugs specialize in eating jellyfish, immune to the stings or able to incorporate the stinging cells into their own bodies for defense. When jellyfish die, whether from old age, predation, or environmental stress, their bodies sink to the ocean floor in events scientists call jellyfalls. These carcasses provide food for deep-sea scavengers, crabs, sea cucumbers, brittle stars, bacteria. In the deep ocean, where food is scarce, a jellyfall can be a significant nutrient input, supporting entire communities of organisms that might otherwise starve. Jellyfalls also play a role in carbon sequestration, the process by which carbon is removed from the atmosphere and stored in the deep ocean. When jellyfish sink after death, they carry carbon from the surface waters down to the sea floor, where it can remain trapped in sediment for thousands or even millions of years. This is a small but measurable contribution to the ocean's ability to absorb atmospheric carbon dioxide. Jellyfish also engage in symbiotic relationships with other organisms. Some species host algae within their tissues, similar to corals. These zooxanthellae, as they're called, photosynthesize using sunlight, producing nutrients that the jellyfish can absorb. In return, the jellyfish provides the algae with a protected environment and access to sunlight as it drifts near the surface. This partnership is particularly common in tropical and subtropical jellyfish species. Other animals use jellyfish as mobile shelters. Small fish, particularly juveniles, sometimes swim beneath jellyfish bells or among their tentacles, using them as protection from larger predators. These fish have developed immunity or resistance to the stings, allowing them to hide in a space where most other fish won't venture. It's a risky strategy, but effective. Some crabs and amphipods also hitch rides on jellyfish, clinging to the bell and feeding on scraps of prey captured by the tentacles. The jellyfish doesn't benefit directly from this relationship, but it doesn't seem to be harmed either. It's commensalism, one organism benefiting while the other is unaffected. Jellyfish also contribute to nutrient cycling in the ocean. As they feed, digest, and excrete waste, they release nutrients back into the water. These nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, can stimulate plankton growth, creating localized blooms that feed other organisms. It's a form of nutrient recycling, where jellyfish act as mobile processors, converting prey into dissolved nutrients that re-enter the food web. Their mucus, constantly secreted as they move through the water, also plays a role. This mucus contains organic matter, bacteria, and particles that aggregate into marine snow, the name for the continuous rain of organic material falling from surface waters to the deep ocean. Marine snow feeds a wide range of organisms, from filter feeders to deep-sea bacteria, and jellyfish mucus is part of that system. In healthy, balanced ecosystems, jellyfish populations are kept in check by predators, competition, and environmental limits. They're numerous enough to play their ecological role, but not so abundant that they dominate. They consume plankton, but leave enough for other species. They provide food for turtles and sunfish. When they die, they nourish the deep sea. But when ecosystems become imbalanced, through overfishing, pollution, or climate change, jellyfish can shift from supporting actors to dominant players. Without enough predators to control their numbers, without enough fish to compete with them for plankton, jellyfish populations can explode, fundamentally altering the structure of the ecosystem. This is why jellyfish blooms are concerning. It's not just that they're a nuisance or a danger to swimmers, it's that they're a symptom of deeper ecological shifts, a sign that the ocean's balance is tilting in a direction that favors simple, resilient organisms over complex, specialized ones. Still, in their natural role, jellyfish are neither villains nor heroes. They're simply part of the system, consuming and being consumed, living and dying, contributing to the flow of energy and nutrients that keeps the ocean alive. They're threads in the web, And like all threads, when you pull on one, the entire structure shifts. But beyond their ecological role, jellyfish possess abilities that seem almost supernatural, powers of regeneration and adaptation that push the boundaries of what we thought biology could do. Let's explore those strange abilities next. If you cut a starfish in half, both pieces can sometimes regenerate into complete organisms. If you damage a lizard's tail, it grows back. But these are exceptions, remarkable abilities that set certain animals apart. For jellyfish, regeneration isn't remarkable. It's standard. It's just what they do. Jellyfish have an extraordinary capacity to heal and rebuild themselves. Lose a few tentacles to a predator, they'll grow back within days or weeks. Damage part of the bell? The tissue repairs itself, often without leaving a scar. Even more impressively, some jellyfish can survive being cut into multiple pieces, with each fragment regenerating into a smaller but complete individual. This ability comes from the simplicity of their body structure. Remember, jellyfish have only two main tissue layers with that gelatinous mesoglea in between. They don't have complex organ systems that need to be perfectly reconstructed. They don't have brains that need to rewire or hearts that need to reform. They just need to regrow tissue, extend tentacles, and restore the nerve net. The nerve net itself is key to this regeneration because it's decentralized, distributed throughout the body rather than concentrated in one location. Damage to part of the jellyfish doesn't disable the whole organism. The remaining nerve net continues functioning, coordinating movement and feeding while the damaged areas slowly rebuild. Some species take this even further. Moon jellyfish, for example, have been observed regrowing entire sections of their bell after significant damage. In laboratory experiments, researchers have cut moon jellyfish into pieces, and under the right conditions, multiple pieces survived and regenerated. Not every fragment makes it. The pieces need to be large enough and include enough of the right tissue types, but the fact that it's possible at all is remarkable. This regenerative ability extends to their reproductive structures as well. If gonads, the organs that produce eggs or sperm, are damaged, they can regenerate, allowing the jellyfish to continue reproducing even after injury. This resilience means that physical damage, unless it's catastrophic, rarely prevents a jellyfish from completing its life cycle. But regeneration is just one of their strange abilities. Jellyfish can also reproduce asexually through a process called fission. Some species can split themselves in half intentionally, creating two genetically identical individuals from one. It's not a response to injury. It's a deliberate reproductive strategy, a way to increase numbers quickly when conditions are favorable. This process usually happens in the polyp stage, where it's easier to divide and regrow. But some medusae can also undergo fission, essentially cloning themselves while drifting through the ocean. It's a way to hedge bets, to ensure survival even if sexual reproduction fails or mates are scarce. Then there's their tolerance for extreme conditions. Some jellyfish species can survive being frozen, not just chilled, but frozen solid ice crystals forming in their tissues. When conditions warm, they thaw out and continue living as if nothing happened. This is almost unheard of in complex animal. Ice formation usually ruptures cell membranes, destroying tissue. But jellyfish, with their high water content and simple structure, can sometimes survive the process. Other species tolerate extreme temperature fluctuations, living in intertidal zones where they're exposed to air during low tide and submerged during high tide. They endure temperature swings of 20 degrees Celsius or more within a single day. along with changes in salinity and oxygen levels. Most marine animals couldn't survive such variability. Jellyfish barely notice. And then there are the box jellyfish eyes. We mentioned earlier that box jellyfish have some of the most sophisticated eyes in the invertebrate world. But what's truly strange is what they can do with them. Box jellyfish can see obstacles, navigate around them, and even learn from their environment. In experiments, box jellyfish placed in tanks with vertical stripes painted on the walls learned to avoid swimming into the walls after just a few minutes. They adjusted their swimming patterns, actively steering away from obstacles. This implies not just vision, but spatial awareness and some form of memory. And remember, they have no brain. The processing happens in the nerve net, distributed throughout their body. Box jellyfish also appear to hunt actively. Unlike most jellyfish, which drift passively and wait for prey to come to them, box jellyfish can swim with purpose, changing direction, pursuing prey, and navigating through complex environments like mangrove roots and coral reefs. How they coordinate this behavior without centralized processing remains one of the great mysteries of jellyfish biology. Another strange ability is their capacity to adjust their buoyancy. Jellyfish can control whether they float, sink, or hover at a specific depth by changing the composition of their mesoglia and the amount of ions in their tissues. By adjusting salt concentrations, they can make themselves slightly more or less dense than seawater, allowing them to rise or fall without expending much energy. This is crucial for vertical migration, a behavior common in many jellyfish species. During the day, they sink into deeper, darker waters to avoid predators and conserve energy. At night, they rise toward the surface, where plankton is more abundant. This daily migration can span hundreds of meters, and it's all controlled through subtle changes in tissue chemistry.
Some jellyfish can also survive extreme pressures in the deep sea.
Species found at depths of several thousand meters experience pressures that would crush most terrestrial animals instantly. But jellyfish, being mostly water and having no air-filled cavities, are unaffected. Pressure compresses water only slightly, so jellyfish at depth look and function almost identically to those at the surface. There's also evidence that some jellyfish can sense and respond to gravity independently at different parts of their body. The statocysts in their aeropalia detect orientation. But recent research suggests that different sections of the nerve net can process this information locally, allowing parts of the jellyfish to adjust independently. It's a form of distributed decision-making, where the body acts as a collective rather than following orders from a central command. And finally, there's their longevity, or rather, the lack of traditional aging in some species. We talked about turritopsis and its ability to reverse aging. But even jellyfish that don't revert to polyps often show negligible senescence, meaning they don't seem to age in the way most animals do. They don't slow down as they get older. Their tissues don't degrade predictably, they simply live until something kills them. All of these abilities, regeneration, cloning, freezing tolerance, complex vision without a brain, buoyancy control, pressure resistance, negligible aging, point to the same conclusion. Jellyfish aren't just simple. They're elegantly adapted, fine-tuned by hundreds of millions of years of evolution to survive almost anything the ocean can throw at them. They don't need complexity to be successful. They've found a different path, one where simplicity, flexibility, and resilience matter more than intelligence or strength, and in doing so, They've developed capabilities that still baffle scientists and inspire researchers looking for answers to some of biology's biggest questions. But jellyfish aren't just subjects of curiosity. They're also proving useful to humans in surprising ways, from medicine to technology to our understanding of life itself. Let's explore how these ancient creatures are shaping modern science. For most of human history, jellyfish were considered curiosities at best, nuisances at worst. They washed up on beaches, stung swimmers, clogged fishing nets, and offered little in return. But over the last few decades, scientists have begun to see them differently. These ancient, brainless drifters are now contributing to breakthroughs in medicine, technology, and our understanding of biology itself. We've already talked about green fluorescent protein, or GFP, the glowing substance extracted from the jellyfish Acaria victoria. That discovery alone transformed biological research, giving scientists a tool to visualize cellular processes in real time. But GFP was just the beginning. The success of that protein sparked interest in what else jellyfish might offer. One of the most exciting areas of research involves aging and cellular regeneration. The immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii, has become a focal point for scientists studying longevity. If we can understand how this jellyfish reverses its cellular age, the mechanisms behind transdifferentiation, we might unlock ways to repair damaged tissues in humans, regenerate organs, or even slow the aging process. Researchers are mapping the jellyfish's genome, identifying the genes that allow its cells to dedifferentiate and reprogram themselves. Some of these genes are shared with humans, dormant or underutilized in our own biology. If we could activate or enhance those pathways, we might be able to coax human cells into regenerating more effectively, repairing injuries that currently leave permanent damage. This research is still in its early stages, but the potential is enormous. Imagine treating heart attacks by regenerating damaged cardiac tissue, or reversing neurodegenerative diseases by regrowing brain cells. Jellyfish might hold keys to these possibilities, hidden in their simple, ancient biology. Beyond regeneration, jellyfish are also inspiring advances in materials science. Their mesoglia, that jelly-like middle layer, is remarkably strong despite being mostly water. It's flexible, resilient, and capable of absorbing impact without tearing. Engineers are studying its structure to develop new materials for medical implants, soft robotics, and protective coatings. The mesoglia's composition, a network of collagen fibers suspended in a hydrated matrix, is similar to cartilage in some ways, but more adaptable. Scientists are exploring how to synthesize similar materials that could be used in joint replacements, wound dressings, or artificial tissues that need to bend and stretch without breaking. Jellyfish collagen itself is becoming a commodity. Unlike collagen from pigs or cows, jellyfish collagen has a lower risk of triggering immune responses in humans. It's being used in skincare products, cosmetic treatments, and experimental wound healing applications. The collagen is extracted from farmed jellyfish or harvested from blooms that would otherwise be wasted. In robotics, jellyfish have inspired a new generation of soft robots. Traditional robots are rigid, built from metal and plastic, designed for strength and precision. But soft robots are flexible, able to navigate tight spaces, handle delicate objects, and move through unpredictable environments. Jellyfish, with their pulsing locomotion and adaptable bodies, are perfect models. Engineers have built robotic jellyfish that swim using artificial muscles, mimicking the rhythmic contractions of a real bell. These robots could be used for underwater exploration, environmental monitoring, or search and rescue operations in flooded areas. Because they move gently and quietly, they don't disturb marine life, making them ideal for studying sensitive ecosystems. Some researchers are even exploring jellyfish as a food source. In parts of Asia, particularly China, Japan, and Korea, jellyfish have been eaten for centuries, usually dried, salted, and served in salads or as a crunchy garnish. But as jellyfish blooms increase worldwide, there's growing interest in expanding jellyfish fisheries to other regions. Jellyfish are high in protein, low in calories, and relatively sustainable to harvest. They reproduce quickly, require no feeding or care, and blooms often occur in areas where fish stocks have declined. Turning a nuisance into a resource could help manage blooms while providing food. The challenge is convincing Western cultures where jellyfish aren't traditionally eaten to accept them as cuisine. There's also interest in using jellyfish for biofuel. Their bodies are mostly water, but that water can be extracted and the remaining organic material can be processed into biogas or fertilizer. It's not a perfect solution. The energy yield is low, but it's another way to turn abundant jellyfish into something useful, rather than simply disposing of them. In medicine, jellyfish venom is being studied for potential therapeutic applications. While most jellyfish stings are painful but harmless, some venoms contain compounds that affect the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, or cellular membranes in specific ways. Scientists are isolating these compounds to see if they can be modified into drugs. Some jellyfish toxins show promise as painkillers, targeting nerve receptors in ways that differ from opioids, potentially offering pain relief without addiction risk. Others are being investigated as treatments for heart arrhythmias or as tools for studying how ion channels in cells function. Even deadly box jellyfish venom, which has caused human fatalities, contains molecules that could lead to new medications if properly understood and controlled. Jellyfish are also valuable in aquarium settings, not just for public display, but for education and research. Public aquariums featuring jellyfish exhibits have become increasingly popular, allowing people to observe these creatures up close, to see their mesmerizing movements, their translucent beauty, their alien grace. These exhibits help shift public perception, turning jellyfish from pests into subjects of wonder. For researchers, keeping jellyfish in controlled environments allows for detailed study of their biology, reproduction, and behavior. Laboratories can breed jellyfish, observe their entire life cycle, and run experiments that would be impossible in the wild. This controlled research is essential for understanding how jellyfish might respond to changing ocean conditions and for discovering new applications of their unique abilities. There's even interest in using jellyfish to monitor ocean health. Because they're sensitive to temperature, salinity, and pollution, changes in jellyfish populations can serve as early warning signs of environmental shifts. Tracking jellyfish blooms, their timing, location, and species composition gives scientists data about ocean conditions that might be harder to measure directly. Some conservationists are now concerned about certain jellyfish species, particularly those in isolated or vulnerable habitats. While most jellyfish are thriving, even increasing in abundance, a few species may be at risk from habitat destruction or pollution. Protecting these species means preserving the ecosystems they're part of, another reason to study and understand them better. So, jellyfish, once dismissed as simple annoyances, are proving to be remarkably useful. They're teaching us about aging, inspiring new technologies, providing materials and food, offering potential medicines, and helping us monitor the health of our oceans. Not bad for a creature with no brain. But for all we've learned, there's still so much we don't understand. Jellyfish remain mysterious. Their biology full of questions we're only beginning to answer. And maybe that's fitting. Because the deeper we look, the stranger they become. We've spent the last hour or so exploring jellyfish from every angle. Their bodies, their weapons, their immortality, their survival across eons. We've looked at how they eat, how they reproduce, how they glow in the dark and drift through currents older than continents. But for all we've learned, the deeper truth is this: jellyfish remain one of the ocean's greatest mysteries. There are still species we've never seen alive. The deep ocean, covering more than 60% of Earth's surface, remains less explored than the surface of Mars. Down there, in trenches and abyssal plains where sunlight never reaches, jellyfish drift in total darkness. We catch glimpses of them through remotely operated vehicles, brief encounters recorded on camera before they disappear back into the black. But we don't know how many species exist, how they behave, or what role they play in those extreme environments. Some of these deep-sea jellyfish are bizarre, even by jellyfish standards. Bells shaped like helmets, tentacles that branch like fractals, bioluminescent patterns that flash in sequences we can't decode. Are they communicating? Hunting? Defending themselves? We're guessing, piecing together fragments of behavior from seconds of footage captured miles beneath the surface. Even with the species we know well, the ones we can study in laboratories and aquariums, there are fundamental questions we can't answer. One of the biggest is about consciousness and awareness. Do jellyfish experience anything? Is there any form of subjective experience happening inside that nerve net? Or are they purely mechanical, biological automatons responding to stimuli without any inner life? It's a question that feels almost philosophical, but it's rooted in biology. We know jellyfish respond to light, to touch, to chemical signals. Box jellyfish appear to learn, to remember obstacles and adjust their behavior. That implies some form of information processing, some way of integrating past experience with present action. But does that constitute awareness? Is there something it's like to be a jellyfish, or is it all just chemistry and physics playing out in slow motion? We don't know, and we might never know, because consciousness is notoriously difficult to measure or define, even in animals with complex brains. For a creature with no brain at all, the question becomes almost unanswerable. Yet, it nags at us, because jellyfish seem to exist in a space between the purely mechanical and the genuinely alive, in ways that challenge our categories. Another mystery is how jellyfish coordinate complex behaviors without centralized control. We've talked about the nerve net, the decentralized system of neurons that spreads throughout their bodies. But how does that network produce coordinated movement? How do thousands of muscle cells contract in precise rhythms to pulse the bell? How do box jellyfish process visual information from 24 eyes without a brain to integrate it all? Recent research suggests that jellyfish might use a form of distributed computing, where different parts of the nerve net handle different tasks independently, then synchronize through chemical and electrical signals. It's like a democracy of neurons, each one voting on what to do next, with the collective decision emerging from the interaction of thousands of individual responses. But the details, how it actually works at the cellular level, are still being unraveled. There's also the question of how jellyfish sense time. Many species exhibit daily vertical migrations, rising and sinking on predictable schedules, even in laboratory tanks where light and temperature are held constant. This suggests they have some form of internal clock, a biological rhythm that persists without external cues. But where is that clock located? How is it maintained in a decentralized nervous system? What molecular mechanisms keep time in a creature with no brain? We don't fully understand their life cycles either. We know about polyps and medusae, about strobilation and metamorphosis, but the triggers, what exactly causes a polyp to begin producing medusae, are still being studied. Temperature, light, food availability, all play roles, but the genetic and hormonal pathways involved are complex and not entirely mapped. For some species, we've never even observed the polyp stage in the wild, only in captivity. And then there's the paradox of their simplicity. Jellyfish are ancient, unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, yet they possess abilities that seem advanced. Regeneration, biological immortality in some species, sophisticated eyes without brains to process images. How did these abilities evolve in organisms so simple? What selective pressures shaped them? And why haven't other animals developed similar traits? The more we study jellyfish, the more we realize how little we understand about the fundamental nature of life itself. We tend to think of complexity as progress, as evolution moving toward bigger brains, more intricate organs, higher intelligence. But jellyfish remind us that simplicity can be just as successful, maybe more so. They've survived longer than almost anything, thrived in environments where complex animals fail, and found solutions to biological problems we're still trying to solve. There's poetry in that, in the idea that something so alien, so fundamentally different from us, has been drifting through the same oceans we now explore, existing without thought, without ambition, without fear or hope or memory, just pulsing gently through the water, responding to the currents, capturing what comes within reach, releasing what doesn't serve them. Maybe that's the real lesson jellyfish offer. Not their biology, though that's endlessly fascinating. Not their resilience, though that's impressive. But the way they exist, without resistance, without overthinking. They don't fight the current, they move with it. They don't plan for tomorrow, they simply respond to today. They've been doing this for 600 million years, and it works. For us, thinking creatures with complex brains and endless anxieties, there's something almost calming about that. The idea that somewhere in the ocean, right now, jellyfish are drifting, not worried about the future, not haunted by the past, just existing, moment to moment, pulse by pulse, carried by forces larger than themselves. So, as you drift off tonight, maybe think about jellyfish, about how they survived every catastrophe Earth has thrown at them, not through strength or intelligence, but through simplicity and patience. About how they glow in the dark without knowing why, about how they drift without destination and somehow end up exactly where they need to be. And maybe, just for tonight, you can be a little like them. Let go of resistance. Stop fighting the current. Just breathe, slowly, deeply, and let yourself drift. The ocean is vast, the night is long, and somewhere out there, jellyfish are pulsing gently through the dark, reminding us that sometimes the simplest way to survive is to just let go. Good night, and let the current carry you. So here we are, at the end of our journey through the strange, translucent world of jellyfish. We started tonight by asking what it would be like to meet a creature with no brain, no heart, and potentially no death. And now, after drifting through their biology, their history, their mysteries, maybe you understand why jellyfish are so much more than the simple blobs they appear to be. They're survivors, ancient beyond measure, adaptable beyond reason. They've outlasted dinosaurs, ice ages, mass extinctions, and the rise of human civilization. They've done it without complexity, without intelligence, without any of the things we consider essential for success. Just simplicity, patience, and an unshakable ability to exist within the flow rather than fight against it. Think about what we've learned tonight. Jellyfish have no central nervous system, yet they coordinate movement, sense light and gravity, and in some cases, even learn from experience. They have no circulatory system, yet every cell in their bodies receives oxygen and nutrients. They have no brain to process fear or pain, yet they've survived longer than almost any other complex life form on Earth. They reproduce in ways that seem like science fiction, transforming from one life stage to another, cloning themselves, and in at least one species, reversing the aging process entirely. They glow in the dark without knowing why, producing light that has revolutionized human medicine and earned scientists a Nobel Prize. They drift through oceans without destination, yet somehow end up exactly where they need to be. And maybe that's the connection to sleep, to this moment you're in right now. Because sleep, like drifting through ocean currents, isn't something you can force. You can't think your way into it. You can't control it with willpower or strategy. The more you try to grab hold of it, the further it slips away. Sleep requires surrender. It requires letting go of the day, of your thoughts, of your need to direct and manage everything. Jellyfish have mastered this in a way we never can, because they have no choice. They can't overthink, they can't plan. They can't lie awake worrying about tomorrow or replaying yesterday. They simply exist in the present moment, responding to what's in front of them, releasing what isn't, moving with the current rather than against it. We, with our complex brains and endless inner monologues, struggle with this. We carry the day into the night. We replay conversations, rehearse future scenarios, solve problems that don't exist yet. Our minds are engines that never fully stop, even when our bodies desperately need them to. And that's where the insomnia lives, in that gap between what our bodies need and what our minds won't release. But tonight, you've spent this time learning about creatures that exist without thought, without anxiety, without resistance. You followed their story from ancient seas to modern laboratories, from microscopic polyps to giants with tentacles longer than whales. You've watched them glow, regenerate, survive, and drift. And maybe, in the process, your own mind has started to drift too. That's the secret these videos hold. Not that the information itself puts you to sleep, though the calm pacing helps. It's that by focusing your attention on something outside yourself, something vast and strange and ancient, you create space between your thoughts. You stop rehearsing tomorrow. You stop replaying today. You just listen, absorb, and gradually, without noticing exactly when it happens, you let go. Jellyfish have been doing this for 600 million years, letting go, moving with the current, trusting that the ocean will carry them where they need to be. They don't resist the darkness of the deep sea. They don't fight the cold of Arctic waters. They don't struggle against the bloom and crash of their populations. They simply exist within whatever conditions surround them, adapting, regenerating, surviving. And maybe that's what we need to learn from them. Not their biology, though that's remarkable. Not their resilience, though that's inspiring. but their relationship with existence itself. The way they pulse gently through the water without destination, without urgency, without the crushing weight of self-awareness that keeps us awake at night. Of course, we can never be jellyfish. We have brains, complicated and wonderful and exhausting. We have memories, plans, hopes, fears. We carry our past and our future with us everywhere we go. But maybe, just for tonight, we can borrow something from them. The permission to stop directing, the willingness to drift, the understanding that sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing at all. So as your eyes grow heavier, as your breathing slows, as the pillow beneath your head becomes the only thing that matters, think about those jellyfish out there right now, pulsing through dark water. They're not thinking about you. They're not thinking about anything. They're just existing, moment by moment, pulse by pulse, carried by currents older than memory. And you can exist that way too, at least for the next few hours. Let your thoughts drift. Let your muscles relax. Let the current of sleep carry you wherever it wants to take you. You don't need to direct it. You don't need to control it. You just need to stop resisting it. Before you fully drift away, if you enjoyed tonight's journey through the biology of jellyfish, go ahead and like this video. Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into the strange corners of the natural world. And let me know in the comments what you'd like to explore next. What other creatures, what other biological mysteries, what other ancient survivors deserve an hour of calm, curious attention. But don't feel obligated. If you're already half asleep, if your phone is slipping from your hand, if the world is fading into that soft, dark space between waking and dreaming, then just let it happen. The like button will still be there tomorrow. The comments can wait. Right now, the only thing that matters is this. You're safe, you're comfortable, and you're allowed to let go. Somewhere in the ocean tonight, a jellyfish is drifting. No thoughts, no worries, no resistance. Just existence, pure and simple. And tonight, just for a few hours, you get to be a little like that too. Good night. Let the current carry you. And may your sleep be as deep and as peaceful as the darkest ocean trench, where jellyfish have been glowing softly for longer than anyone can remember.